there is this formula when you talk to venture capital that they have in mind of within a certain time, you must have hit these milestones. They don't necessarily take into consideration the needs of pivots due to technological changes.
The vulnerabilities that you've just explained, and thank you for being open enough to do so, means to me, through the lens that our investment committee would look at you, would make you more of an investable founder than somebody who's going at this first time claiming to have everything right. I think one of the key things is everything is around success straight away. And if you listen to any successful founder, they will tell you that the success came after a number of essentially failures, right? Opportunities to pivot. And what you have shown is a resilience to be able to go through those pivots.
Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher and the founder of MTP. In today's episode, I speak with Ali Karimi of Mayfair Technology Partners, a venture studio based in London. We focus mostly on mental health and the challenges that startup founders face on their journey. Building a startup is extremely difficult. In fact, it's one of the most difficult things that you can ever do, and it can really take a toll on your mental health. I found this conversation to be super helpful to me as a founder, and I hope you do too. So, Ali, we had initially a conversation about you coming onto the platform and talking to various startup founders and some of the different kind of challenges that we face as founders. And then the conversation was so interesting that I thought to get you on the podcast and to talk about some of these as well. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and your background, and then we will take it from there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And secondly, my name's Ali Karimi. I'm the founder of what we call a venture studio called Mayfair Technology Partners. And we kind of operate at the intersection between venture capital and early stage business. So back in kind of 2017, 2018, myself and a partner of mine, William Stadlin, were investing in early stage business. All digitally enabled businesses. And one thing that we found was there's a large disconnect, specifically between non-tech founders around the creation of digital infrastructure. And most of that was typically offshored. In those days, we were using India as a market to offshore. What we found is there was a disconnect between what founders would articulate or explain that they wanted to create or deliver and what was actually delivered by the software houses they were outsourcing to. Not to say that there was a blame particularly on either side. I thought the process is just in itself needed to be kind of relooked at. So what we did is we spent the next kind of few years acquiring a software development company, bringing that whole process in-house, and basically having more control over the delivery and the development of digital infrastructure for early stage businesses. So now at MTP, we have set up in 2020. We have a portfolio of around 15 companies. These are from concept that and incubated to early stage to established businesses that have undergone a digital transformation. And as a kind of venture studio, we offer, as best we can, a full suite of services from concept validation and business planning, investment, preparation, whether that's our own investment or sourcing third-party capital. And then once that capital has been deployed, we then go along the journey with the businesses as their digital partner to build and develop their infrastructure and help them kind of launch, scale, and grow from there.
That's really cool. So this concept of venture studio is quite new to me. I didn't know anything about it until recently, and now I've recently met quite a few venture studios, and it sort of makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking more that might be a right direction for us as well, because as a sole founder, it's something that if you don't have a technical co-founder, this could be an option. Is this a new concept, or has it been around for a while?
To my mind, I guess, I mean, we when we looked at this back in 2017, 2018, most of the relationships were kind of agency-based relationships. So they were kind of yes, you can outsource to a partner, but it was still a you or a we conversation. The whole idea of a venture studio is the conversation about you or I is irrelevant. It's about us, the collective, working together. And what we did, we changed our model slightly. So we invest in those companies through what we call match funding in our services. So non-cash investments, but an investment through technical services that we put into the company. Therefore, we're on the cap table, and we've got a vested interest in the future of the business. So to go back to your question, is it a new? I'm not entirely sure. I'm with you. Like, there's been a lot of chatter on social channels and conferences and events about venture studio. I think people are still trying to figure out what it is. But for us, essentially, the model's no different than we want to be as closely aligned to an in-house development team as we can, but with just having the ability to kind of scale up and down as you need to.
No, super interesting. So obviously you're going to be doing a session on the platform separately. But today what we wanted to talk about was more on the mental health side of things for founders. And as we talked about in the beginning, before I press record, this is very apt because I'm actually having a little bit of a moment myself. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background and like the specific challenge that I'm facing right now. And I'm very candid about these things because this podcast gets recorded. A lot of other founders listen to it, and I'm sure that they will also, this will resonate with. Basically, we have had to go through a few pivots to find the exact product market fit. In the beginning, so the idea has always been, we want to build this platform for other, B2B or in general, other creators to use it to create communities. And the difference between what we're building with existing things like Kajabi or, all sorts of other types of community building platforms is that our goal is eventually for this to become a new social network or a professional network. So you can think of it as an improved version of LinkedIn meets Masterclass meets Discord. So you have the community building aspect, you have the content management aspect, because LinkedIn, when LinkedIn was created, it was not built for content. It was supposed to be a place for people to put their CVs on, right? So it was not, it was never meant to be a content management system. And the problem is that things have evolved, and the needs of the current creators and the companies that are building communities, those needs have changed a lot, and none of the existing platforms really are suitable for that. So basically what we have learned is that yes, content is king. Content is the way to build your community, is the way to build that initial touch point, build an audience, and then turn your audience into a community. And I always say there's difference between an audience and a community. The audience is people who are on social media. You don't have their details, they're like your first level touch point. And then communities, once you've got their detail, you've got that open dialogue with them. So I've been always wanting to build this new kind of next generation of social network that is focused on community building. We've had to go through a few different product market fit testing. The difference between what we are building with kind of replicating the exacting networks is that when you're building something new, you have to do a lot more product market fit test until you find the exact model that works. So we started out with women because we thought that could be a good point to try and build an initial community. We found that was too small. There were not enough women who were building companies. So we expanded from there to Web3 because Web3 was at the time quite hot, and it seemed like this was going to be the next, and Web3 equates, community building in many ways. It just seemed like the perfect product market fit. However, that didn't last long enough. So now Web3 has become essentially almost like a swear word. Like I was at a conference now that I just came back from in LA. And it's like mention of Web3 almost gets a violent reaction of no, I don't want to go anywhere near that. So so we've had to pivot from that. And now we're building this new community of startup founders and VCs. And this is the third iteration in terms of the third try. The foundation of the platform is the same. We built a lot of technology. We built really, really cool Web3 technology that can't be used right now. We've shelved it, with token gating and wallet gating and all that stuff. So now we just started email gating. We created a whole new system of email gating. And basically all of the things that we could see could be like the next innovation in Web3, in terms of building a digital identity, a layer of digital identity, we can't use that now because people are not interested in Web3. So we are having to rebuild all of that. So as you can imagine, that's very tough, as a founder, having to deal with that. Being a sole founder as well, that's like another level of like everything is on you. There's nobody to kind of bounce back ideas, right? And also in terms of monetization, in Web3 there was a different kind of focus. Monetization, as we know, monetization model in Web3 is not very well defined yet. It's something that is being worked on through tokenomics, etc. So we've had to pause monetization. We did some monetization in Web3, but we have had to pause it and rebuild a whole new business model. And there is this formula that when you talk to venture capital, there is this formula that they have in mind of within a certain time, you must have had certain things and you must have hit these milestones. But those, they don't necessarily take into consideration the needs of pivots due to technological changes. So yeah, so it's a tough spot. So any thoughts on?
Well, there's a few different things to unpick there, but I think the one thing, and I think I explained this to you when we first had our call, and why we're kind of leaning toward the topic of mental health, is a lot of my time is spent with our portfolio founders and actually just talking to them on a human-to-human level, de facto therapy, if you'd like to call it that. It's part of the reason actually we moved out to Southwest London. Other than our UK team is based here, we are in Wimbledon Village, which has a lovely common across the road. And most of the time, I take our founders across the road and we just walk for maybe a couple of hours out in nature and try to be inspired by the ideas that come to us, rather than forcing an answer through. But to answer your kind of question more specifically, I guess, look, the vulnerabilities that you've just explained, and thank you for being open enough to do so, means to me, through the lens that our investment committee would look at you, would make you more of an apt or more of an investable founder than somebody who's going at this first time claiming to have everything right. I think one of the key things, and you touched on LinkedIn, and it's part of my kind of frustration with the platform, is everything is around success straight away. And if you listen to any successful founder long in the tooth enough to be worth their salt, they will tell you that the success came after a number of essentially failures, right? Opportunities to pivot. And what you have shown is the nous to be able to pivot, but you've also shown a resilience to be able to go through those pivots, right? I think for me, if you have enough determination to make something succeed, then you will be able to, through the nature of pivoting and through the nature of going and finding, as you articulated, your product market fit. But what I find is that a lot of early stage founders particularly lose appetite because in their first, let's say, failure, or their first thing that wasn't as successful as they envisaged, they don't have the determination or the willpower, the strength to persevere and say, okay, this wasn't right, but elements of it were right, and actually let me pivot and try and do something else. And one of the things, again, I should struggle with LinkedIn is the fact that everything's about a success story. Everything's about how great everything was. And occasionally you do get some vulnerability stories on there. But, for me, again, you are having gone through those pivots, having gone through things that you thought were going to succeed and haven't. are now a more credible founder, because the next time you go at something, you'll take into consideration all of your past experiences, which make you stronger and more resilient for the future moving forward. So look, I don't think there's a kind of one size fits all approach, but one thing that I do, and this is somebody who runs a digital venture studio, but from a non-technical background, we've just spent 10 minutes you teaching me how to kind of use my camera properly. Is that technology is great, but you have to also remember behind the technology is a human, right? And that no matter how advanced our technology gets, and part of the reason we haven't jumped into Web3 just yet is because I fully believe in the adoption and the possibilities that are associated with blockchain technology. I'm completely bought in. But you also have people in our local communities in London who barely have access to kind of high-speed broadband and internet. So you have to kind of marry up this situation where we have these technologies, but actually is society ready to adopt them yet? Is the human on the other side ready to embrace them yet? And if they're not, that's absolutely okay. And maybe we should just, in fact, pare down our expectations a little bit and say, okay, what can we work with right now? And so still to this day, most of our ventures that we invest in are through traditional Web2 technologies, mobile apps and e-commerce platforms and B2B SaaS solutions, whatever they may be, because people are comfortable with and know how to use them. At the point in which we can integrate and we can kind of pivot towards Web3, we'll absolutely do that, but we won't do it until the human element on either side is ready for us to do so.
That's right. I think one of the biggest problems with Web3 is this level of complexity. I always say Web3 has got three big problems. It's too complex. There's regulatory, there isn't regulatory clarity, and the speculation aspect, because unfortunately, because of its hyper financialization, people focus on the wrong areas. So tell me a little bit more about, when you talk to the founders that you work with, how do you get them to control their nerves as they're going through these tough times? I have a really good friend of mine that I'm going to actually get on the podcast. She's written a book published by Penguin called The Shed Method, and she talks to a lot of she works basically with executive coaches. And one of the reasons why I haven't talked to her enough recently is that I feel like she may not necessarily know the technical aspect of what I'm dealing with. So I find it really helpful talking to, if I say I had to pivot from this to this to this, and I'm having this issue with product market fit, and now we are trying these things. I think for somebody who has built businesses or is in the venture space would understand that better. But I know that there are also some principles in how, for example, somebody like my friend Sarah Monroe will talk about in terms of how you hold your nerve, how you so get through that. But I'd like to hear from you, because I am going to have Sarah on the pod as well, and kind of like get that comparison between a professional coach that tells you, this is how you can deal with situations, as opposed to somebody who has literally just gone through that themselves.
Yeah, no, the truth is there's no one size fits all approach, right? We're all different. We all respond differently to different techniques. And, far be it for me to be an expert, but I try and just break down the person on a human level. So as I said, the very first thing is changing our environment, right? So those kind of conversations where you're having difficulties, whatever it may be, or for me, they're not best served being discussed in an office or a professional environment. So let's get outside, first of all, right? Let's get out of our heads and enjoy nature, or wherever it may be, a coffee shop, somewhere that you don't feel the weight of expectation of an office on you. And then secondly, what I try and do, because I realize that depending on the nature of the conversation, it can be quite intimidating for somebody to open up and be vulnerable to me, given a position as, a partner, a CEO of a venture studio who is investing in them. I will be often the first one to talk about my vulnerabilities or my challenges in that week, and ask them to help me or suggest a solution in the same way you've done with me here. And I think that automatically kind of alleviates any kind of pressure or any kind of intimidation that people feeling on the other side. And it just brings us back down to, I keep saying, that human to human level, which we all are. And once we can engage in that conversation, I think, there are a number of ways in which you can look at the problem at hand and say, okay, well, and again, the language you use around it, a problem, a failure, these are all negative connotation words, right? Where they shouldn't be that. Okay, imagine we were to celebrate the fact that you're on your third or fourth pivot, as opposed to the negative connotation around it. Imagine we were to celebrate the fact that you've tried something and it's not gone as right as you were, but you've had the resilience to stay through. I think I try and do that as much as I can possibly, because when we triage, or when we run through our kind of methodology for investing in early stage businesses, the truth is, at that stage of a business's kind of embryonic life, the concept, the financial modeling, the plans, yes, they're important, but they're all irrelevant, right? The most important thing is the founder or the founding group, because they're the ones who are going to be able to drive this business and move it forward. And so that's why I say that's the most important touch point for us. And if you can understand what drives, what motivates them, what provides them with anxiety. I mean, fear and anxiety are absolutely fine in this environment, provided you do not let them consume you. And so, sometimes I say to some of my staff here, like I will quite often, and I'm known for this, is throwing them in to a task which they've never undertaken before. And I enjoy watching the immediate reaction, which is, oh my God, I can't do this. What have you asked me to do? And I said two things. Look, one, I would never ask you to do something which I have not done and experienced myself, so I can't coach you through it. And two, I would also never ask you to do something which I don't feel you've got the skills or capabilities to do. So look at the challenge. I embrace the challenge that I've given to you. Right? Look at it as a positive, that somebody's giving you this challenge because they believe in your ability to be able to do it. And then look at the challenge, again, embrace it, and look at the challenge through the lens of, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to get over it. Doesn't matter if it takes me one time or three times or two times. I mean, I was speaking to, I have a young niece, and she's going to her driving test, and she was worried about failing first time. And I said to her, well, how many people do you know, when you speak to them and you ask them if they have their driving license, do you ask how many times did you take your test? Like, it's irrelevant, provided you get your license, you can drive at the end of the day. That's all that matters. So I think just breaking down the problem, embracing it in a whole different light, changing your environments, all important things to be able to get people down on a human to human level. And, I think just removing preconceptions of what society or what business environments tell us are success or non-success. And that's why one of the first things we do with our founders as part of the 100-day plan when we bring them on is align expectations. What is your definition of success? Because it may be super different to my definition of success, and that's okay. But we should have that open and honest conversation, and then you're much more able to kind of measure yourself against what your definition of success is, rather than defining yourself by somebody else's definition of success, or by a fear of failure that you don't even know what it means to you or what it doesn't mean to you.
That's right. So now, when you talk about the definition of success, is there like a template or a blueprint that you would use when you are talking about how somebody should think about success? Because there is a specific definition of success from the viewpoint of venture capital and what is expected of you to achieve within a certain time. And then there is the other side of it, is like you as a person, how you define success. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, and how you think these two things could align in some way.
Yeah, look, here's the thing about venture capital. I've been working in and around venture capital for the last 10 years, and it's obviously it's had a tough time over the last 2 or 3 years. Naturally, industries ebb and flow, but predicated at the heart of the venture capital model is failure, right? Because venture capital model will for every 10 investments, for example, it's very well, and not for every VC, I take this on board, but for many that I've worked with, it's well understood internally that the 10 investments, 8 will fail, and if you have 2 that succeed, then by those metrics you're doing relatively well, and obviously the returns on the 2 that succeed will supersede the loss on the 8. So they're not going into this saying we're going to make 10 investments and we are going to succeed in every one of these investments. Yes, they did their due diligence. in the past it was probably far too light. So now it's probably on the other end of the spectrum. But at the heart of their model is predicated on failure. They are not expecting everything to succeed, right? And we look at this idea of building unicorns or building these business. Unicorns are unicorns for a reason. They're very, very few and far between. But what I would ask people to do is any founder of a unicorn, look behind the facade of the business and just look at what they have had to sacrifice to get there, and say to yourself, okay, if I did build a unicorn, would I want to sacrifice what they have sacrificed to be able to get there? The answer for me in many instances, having read books for founders who've done this, is no. I wouldn't want to sacrifice. But for me, going back to your measure of success, family is super important, right? I have a young child, I have a wife at home, and I love and want to spend time investing into them. So that to me is part of my success. Again, I took a long time I come from a commercial background, right? So, glorified salesman, if you will. We were hit with kind of commercial targets, and our only way of attributing our success or measuring our success was against commercial targets. And if you exceeded those, great. And if you didn't, then you weren't doing your job properly. But it's a very kind of harsh metric to be able to measure success by. So, for me, when I dug down and I took some time out of my career to really review this, actually, for me, what I get validation from personally is helping others to achieve their potential and succeed. And at the heart of our venture studio is exactly that. We provide a supportive network, a framework around founders, be it early stage or later stage, with the idea of sharing in their success and helping them succeed. And that's the bit I get validation from. Yes, of course, we're all interested in financial stability and success on a financial scale to some description. But, been in lots of positions probably where I've had that, and I've not felt any better than I have. For example, moving the needle at a very small company from 0 to 100% has made me feel better than a 6 or 7 or 8 figure deal that we've done in some instances. So for me personally, it's that. And actually, when I meet with with the founders, and one of the things we go through is asking them what validates them and what makes them feel a measure of success. And when it comes to financial success, and again, I've got no aversion to it at all. One thing I advise to everybody that I speak to is, okay, if finance is a data point upon which you measure your success, that's absolutely fine. But please have a definition, have a number, have something to that. If you say to me something tomorrow, Ali, I want to earn £5 million because I want to go and buy this yacht and this Bentley, and it's going to cost me exactly this, I have no issue with that at all, because you know exactly what you want, and more importantly, you know why you want it. So once you hit that 5 million, you can check out, you can do what you want to do, and you can go and buy the 2 things that can make you happy. But I also feel in life there's this cyclical nature of wanting to accumulate wealth or accumulate finance without understanding why you want to do it. And then you get to a point where you've done that, and then you realize, actually, was that the most important thing in my life? Was that the most important thing I should have focused on throughout the last 10, 15, 20 years of my career? For some, perhaps yes, and some perhaps not. So unpicking exactly what it is that validates people, and most importantly, unpicking their motivation, their why. I've got a saying in the company that I say to everybody, it frustrates them, but I say to them, look, if you don't know why you're doing a task, stop and find out first, because you'll never be able to do that task to your full potential unless you know why you're doing it.
Very, very interesting. Does the why matter? So when you talk to founders and once you find out their why, do you judge them based on their why, would you say? Are there some whys that are more powerful than other whys?
Yeah, I mean, look, possibly. I'd like to say no, but I'm human at the same time, so probably likeliness is yes. I do judge them, and I've also got to pare down. I kind of have a very social and philanthropic approach to a lot of things. So if somebody comes to me with a charitable objective or a business that they want to do, which helps and sees good in people, I'm naturally more inclined to sway in that direction. And my investment committee will pare me back down and be like, Ali, we know this is great, and you want to do this, but the one most important currency that we have as a venture studio and as early stage founders is time. And you can only spread your time as much as you can, and you can only spread your bandwidth as much as you can. So even if somebody says, if you say to me something like, I've got this idea and I resonate with it, and I resonate with it too, it might not be necessarily the best thing for our business at that particular time. So I try and look at your objective or your why as agnostically as possible, and I will match it with the fit and the culture of our venture studio and say, look, are we the right people for you? Look, investment in any way is a two-way process. And I think in the early stage founders community, or even late stage founders, we forget that we are chasing capital or chasing investment through an equity-based investment model, which, by the way, is giving up most of your upside, right? Most of your hard work and the value creation, you're giving away in equity of that company, often at a far too cheap rate. And you're doing it because the cash injection that comes into your company, you believe will accelerate your growth. And that's absolutely fine, but it's not always the right way for most people. So I always say investment partnership of anything should be a two-way process. And as much as I am looking at you through the lens of, are you the right fit for our company? Is your motivation, is your purpose the right fit for our company? You as a founder should be doing the same with us or an investor or anybody you're speaking to, because, partnerships are typically long-term. And, I'm touch wood to this day, have never been someone who's had to go back to contractual obligations to unpick, oh, this is our responsibility or this is your responsibility. I've always had relationships with our founder community where I can pick up a phone or go and meet them for a coffee or take them for a walk, as I've said, and hash out a kind of disagreement or a confrontation, whatever it may be, person to person. So I think that's where I look at it. And it's funny, one thing I say to some of our analysts when they're doing their due diligence is that try and put this person or the founder under pressure during your negotiation status. And why I say that is not because I want to create confrontation or to create argument, but actually at that moment when they're under pressure, you really find out their motivations and you really find out how they will deal with situations. And I can tell you from having been in this game for a while that you are going to come under situations very quickly where you're going to come under pressure. And when you come under pressure, it's quite easy to look around at your colleagues, your partners, and start apportioning blame or start looking for reasons and whatever it is. So I said, look, let's try and get to that scenario before we do a deal with somebody to try and find out, look, how is this going to work and how's it going to be? And then we can see that, can we move past? Or is this a situation where every time something goes wrong, it's going to blow up and create a whole load of kind of drama that's not conducive to both parties?
Yeah, definitely. That's how people react under pressure and are able to maintain a positive conversation. It really is telling on how they will be able to deal with things as things evolve, because things never get less complicated. They will always get more complicated, and there will be, you're Persian, right? Like, do you speak Persian?
No, this is
okay.
my dad's family are Parsi.
We have a saying in Persian, هر که بامش بیش برفش بیشتر, which means the bigger your roof, the more snow you accumulate. So it's kind of like, that as the business becomes more complex, you deal with a lot more complex issues. You mentioned about the last few years being particularly difficult in the venture. I just made a note here to make sure I ask this in the venture business. Can you explain a little bit from your point of view where you stand, what caused that? And 2021 seemed like it was the boom for many types of businesses, not just Web3, for many things. And obviously right now there's a lot of excitement around AI, but the kind of that sense of bubbleness, it doesn't exist the way that it was. So other than the interest rates, like what are some of the other, or even with interest rates, you can dive a bit deeper into that. But why do you think all of a sudden there's been this massive shift in the venture business?
Look, if I simplify it as much as possible, it was that the model for VC of the let's say pre-2021, which is when things shifted. Obviously, you had socioeconomic factors, pandemic, and the Russia-Ukraine situation, which didn't help. But essentially, and having kind of worked with VC and having secured investment for a lot of early stage businesses through VC, I have to say, in my experience, not all the time, but a lot of time, kind of there was a bit of a land grab, and valuations were kind of plucked out of thin air. There wasn't a lot of metric behind them. Expectations from VC around what these early stage founders were going to do was sometimes disengaged between what they expected, what the founders expected. And so, money, obviously interest rates as well, made money easily and readily available. It just meant that VC were kind of throwing money at things without, I don't think, properly understanding their why of why they were doing it. I can't imagine the times, and I won't name them, but I've been contacted by VC saying, "Look, have you got any SEIS tickets left? Don't care about the thesis, about the concept of the business. We just want to deploy this capital and try and take down some more of our tax efficiency on it." And the same for angels and so on and so forth. And I think at that time, and I would say specifically kind of early pandemic, what you did get, especially with some of the smaller VC ones, where they were competing with high net worths and angels for investment tickets in early stage businesses. So actually what you had is a supply and demand issue, where you had a shortage of credible businesses coming through triage and a load of cash that was being thrown at them trying to fight for equity in those businesses. And so, VC, like any good business, has had to do what you've done, is pivot and tighten up its model, because the cash is not so readily available anymore. And well, maybe not so readily available is the wrong word, but it's being deployed much more strategically, and they are thinking about them. But also, you've got this now second wave where there were businesses that were invested in kind of, let's say, 2015 to 2020, who are gone through their own struggles, and VCs are having to discuss, but do we double down on them and put some of our investment capital in there, versus how much do we go after new businesses and new opportunities? And so that pool of money, what I'm trying to articulate is that more and more people are going at it. But one thing I say to our founding community at the moment is that don't let that kind of put you off fundraising. First of all, find out, is an equity fundraise the right model for you, right? Debt financing is difficult in this market, particularly for early stage, because interest rates are high, and at concept kind of stage, are you going to be able to do that? But there are other financing models available. There are different ways of getting cash. We kind of advocate sustainable growth and development here. So bootstrapping for as long as you can, holding on to the value. And one of the things, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is equity is the most expensive form of investment. If you are planning and you're going to follow through with the expectations that you have as a business, giving away equity at a lower valuation at an early stage of your business, yes, may help and accelerate growth. But, trust me, further down the line, I've seen enough founders who've had to dilute and say, look, I spent 15 years building this business, or 18 years. I'm about to exit for a significant multiple, but I retain a very low interest in the business anymore on the cap table. And I'm also not really in control of where I am. So it's something that you've got to think about, and finding the right VC is super important. But I think, one of the metrics I would say is, when you're speaking to VC, again, the interview process, make sure it's two-way. But also, you'll see, we just did a round recently, and a VC came back to us with questions, and it was all about revenue multiples and EBITDA, which is fine. We can answer those questions all based on projection. But I said to the founder, look, if that's the very first questions they're asking you, as opposed to your purpose, your culture, are they the right culturally aligned investor for you? Because as soon as you take their capital, it's not smooth sailing. You're going to have to be producing reports to these guys. You're going to have to be kind of keeping them up to date on what you're doing, and you're going to have to be validating some of your business decisions as to why you're making these decisions and why you're going. And if you don't have that cultural fit between your two organizations, it's going to create a kind of really tense working environment. So that's part of my reason, I think, for VCs, that look, they just had to tighten their belts. I think it's not the same economy as it was pre kind of pandemic time. And that capital is having to be stretched much further amongst existing portfolio and new investment opportunities.
Yeah, I find these conversations super helpful, and I'm really hoping that other startup founders listening to this also take some learning away from this. I guess one last question for today is a little bit about location. You mentioned a lot about people that are around you, and that it has to be a two-way conversation between the VCs and startups. How important is it to be in the right location? So as I just came back from LA, quite a number of people have been telling me that you really need to be in San Francisco. Like, there is a completely different environment there, and the speed of things, the kind of mentorship that you get. And I have to say that maybe I haven't put as much effort into discovering the London scene. Maybe there is a bigger scene here, and I'm going to make an effort to really get to know more of the London startup scene. But I do seem to find there's a lot more going on in the US, especially in New York, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the importance of location?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think again, location goes back to the person, and where you feel comfortable, where you feel a fit. I think there are you can find a community, you can find support, you can find financing options wherever you go in most parts of the world, right? But it's about how it makes you feel connecting with that community specifically. Look, San Francisco and the West Coast is obviously a stalwart for innovation, for venture capital, for startups, and for digital kind of business and scaling from that side. But from my perspective, I think we spoke last time, a lot of my work is kind of shifting towards the east at the moment in time. Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Middle East. We have an office in Dubai, and so there's a big connect there. So I absolutely agree. I think networking and finding your kind of community is so important, and doing it face to face. Look, it's not too dissimilar to dating, right? To find your partner in life in some capacity, you've got to get out there, and as much as you can be on social networks, you can be that actually meeting someone face to face by chance, or a conference, or an event, or whatever it is, may spark conversations. Hands up, admittedly, it's not something I have as much time to do anymore, and I really regret that. It's actually stuff I'm finding in my diary to be able to do it, to go out and meet and have conversations on the off chance with people, because that's how you resonate and that's how you build your communities. But I think location depends on what you are looking for, and where you feel most comfortable and at home. And I think, that could be different for different people. We have our development hub is in Pakistan, in South Asia, in Lahore, and traditionally it's a developing country, right? It's essentially it's a developing economy. One of the reasons we are there, but I hadn't visited for a long time, and I visit our staff regularly there. And one of the things I'm shocked by is the amount of personal private wealth in Pakistan at this moment in time. It's absolutely outrageous. So, I have conversations with business people all the time out there who are saying, look, what can we invest in? Like, we are cash rich. And would you, before this, have said to me, should I go to Pakistan to source investment for my business opportunity? Perhaps not, right? So I think no matter where in the world you go to, you'll be able to do that. But it's about, I think most important is you looking at personally where you feel comfortable, where you feel there's a right fit. And then your narrative, I think that's the most important thing, is are you able to articulate what you do, what you offer in the elevator pitch, 30 seconds, right? Super simply. And that's one thing I say to our founders. And look, not to say that people don't want to have long, in-depth conversations, they do. But if you can't articulate what you can do within that short period of time, how are you expecting somebody else on the other side of that conversation to be able to accept and resonate and kind of digest what it is that you're telling them? And one of the things I say to our founders when we're putting together decks or materials or presentations or strategy on their business, I say, look, when you're so close to the bone on something, you want to include everything. And that's natural. That's your nature because you're working on it. But just pick 3, at the maximum 5 key messages that you want to get across. Prioritize those messages and then articulate them as simply as possible you can. And remember, if I'm digesting this on the other side, they're the first 3 or the 5 things I'm going to read. And in a space of 10 seconds to 30 seconds to a minute, I'm really clearly going to be able to understand what it is that you do. I always say, for example, an investment presentation, wherever you send it around the world, it should not dot every I and cross every T. What it should do is introduce your concept, introduce your vision. But if you get a really successful investment presentation, what you should get is a potential investor on the other side coming back to you and said, you mentioned this, can I ask you about X, Y, and Z? And that shows they're engaged. That shows they picked up your concept, they picked up your thing, and they're engaged, and they're coming back to you to ask more questions about your particular opportunity or your motivation or your strategy around it. So it's not always about telling everybody everything the first go. It's just about kind of breaking that down and seeing where it hits, seeing where it resonates. Look, I'm kind of trying to be environmentally conscious, but at the same time, flights around the world are particularly cheap. So I say, get up and go. Like, go to those spaces, go to a conference that you haven't been to before, join online, like join communities, Discord, Slack, whatever it may be, speak to people, have face-to-face conversations, even through Zoom like we're doing now. That's the way that you'll pick up and you'll find out where activity is going on more than you will trawling through LinkedIn for 10 hours a day, trying to pick up insight and tips, in my opinion. Not to say that LinkedIn's a terrible platform, but just in my opinion, there's nothing like speaking to people on an individual basis.
I love it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why we're building in Peak, so that people can have those connections, even if they are not able to necessarily go to every conference, and bring people together in a community kind of environment. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ali. This has been super interesting. I look forward to continuing the conversation with you, having you on the platform. I love these conversations. They are really a great opportunity for me to learn, and hopefully other people also learn through listening. Where can people find you? Are you active on social media? What's the best way?
Unfortunately, I'm not that particularly active on social media, but not really. But our website's mtp.tech. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can find my email address, like my inbox is open directly at any time. So please feel free to contact me or message me on there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But just for bandwidth reasons, I don't particularly spend a lot of time on social media.
Awesome. And people can check out your session coming up on the platform.
Yeah, super looking forward to that, and hope it resonates with people as well.
Awesome, Ali. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Ali Karimi. Please be sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcast so that you don't miss the future episodes. It will mean the world to me if you leave a review and share the podcast with others who you think might enjoy it.